All right. Hello. I am joined today by Ami Canaan Mann, the director of the new film Audrey's Children, based on the life of Dr. Audrey Evans. Amy, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I guess the first question we should ask is, how did you come to this story? How did you find out about Dr. Evans, and what made you want to tell her story?
I came to this, the script was sent to me, and I was reading it, and I came across the scene where she's speaking with one of her patients on the roof of the hospital, and she's explaining to this little girl that's in her care about a way to conceive of her own passing. And that really struck me. I just thought, this is not a position that any adult wants to be in with any child, particularly a child that you're trying to save and likely won't. And yet, this is the kind of work that Dr. Evans did, daily and for decades. And I don't know, I just sort of felt like that was a story I really wanted to try to help tell.
The thing I took away from the movie most was why didn't I already know her name? I mean,
Yeah.
when you look at what she accomplished, there's some notations there in the film at the end about the rates of survival for children's cancer before her work and after. I mean, it is fair to say there are millions of children and the children of those children that are alive today because of her work. Why do you think that she's not a household name?
She was, well, it's her work for the Evans staging system applied to specifically neuroblastoma, which is one of the most difficult childhood cancers to have. She was an incredibly modest person. She was a proud person, but you can be proud and modest at the same time. And I think that was her. It was always it was always for the kids for her. There was when we were at touring CHOP, the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, there was a woman who told us a story that there's apparently, I didn't see it, but there's apparently a room, I don't know if it's a conference room or something, where there's a series of portraits of the kind of preeminent physicians of Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and they wanted Audrey's portrait to be up there too. And she said no unless her portrait could have a child in it. Because for her, it was like, it was always about the kids. And apparently they resisted, but then they capitulated. And that's the portrait that's in the room. And I think that story just really typifies her and her approach to everything. It just was about the kids.
So, and when it came time to casting the lead role, how did you alight upon Natalie Dormer? I mean, obviously, I think most people know her from her role in Game of Thrones, but
Yeah.
obviously, this is a very different kind of role. So, how did you come to her in the casting process?
I actually am not. I'm probably the only person left on the planet who is not a Game of Thrones person. So I didn't know her from Game of Thrones, with all due respect to Game of Thrones. I saw her in a movie that was a remake of Picnic at Hanging Rock. And there was this shot. I knew, I kind of knew the kind of actress that this, what I, the actress I kind of felt really needed the qualities that actors needed to have to be Audrey. There had to be sort of a fire and a passion and a great empathy and a softness at the same time. And so there's this shot in Picnic at Hanging Rock that's on her shoulders, and there was so much power in her shoulders. And then in the shot, she sort of slowly turns to the camera, and you just see it in her face. And I thought, that's Audrey.
And obviously, she was a woman who was a pioneer in a field that was, so male dominated at the time. I don't think that that's really something that's pushed hard in the movie, but you really see it there, just sort of these subtle and maybe not so subtle ways in which she is just dismissed or put aside by some of the other doctors. And I don't know if you felt any parallel of that in your own career as a female director. Women who are pioneers in their fields get that pushback.
Yeah, it was important to me to have the reality of that sexism be the what I would say is the wallpaper of the room rather than the thing in the room that we're battling. Because in my experience in life, and when I went to film school, I was one of two women in the production program by the end. Um, in my experience, that's kind of what it feels like. It's contextual, it's very subtle. You don't really know if you can necessarily name it. It's not something that anybody's necessarily doing, but you can kind of feel, so I wanted to accurately portray that. And I think that, all of us on the film kind of drew from our own experiences of that. And so I tried to create some moments like the moment in the conference room where it's her first day and the guys aren't, looking at her or talking to her. Maybe they think she's a secretary. That kind of thing has happened. It wasn't in the script. I just sort of thought, we're all here. Let's just take a moment and shoot this little thing and see if it works. Because that's stuff I was just telling someone the other day that, I've been the director on a TV show and the van driver has said that was come to pick me up has said, you're not, this isn't your van. I'm here to pick up the director. Okay, it was just like, so it's not, nobody's being mean. Nobody's trying to be malicious. It's just the context that you're in.
Yeah, bias confirmation.
Yeah,
That's what
exactly.
you've experienced, so that's what you think
Yeah, yeah,
everything is.
yeah,
Maybe some of the other cast, Clancy Brown. It was funny as we were watching the movie, they just kept referring to him as Coop, Coop, Coop. It's like, man, the way they've done him up, he looks very familiar. And I finally put it together with C. Everett Koop, the Surgeon
yeah.
General later on, and some of the rest of the cast. How did they come in and contribute?
Well, Jimmy Simpson, I was a massive, massive fan of, and I felt like he would be right because you really needed somebody who could stand toe to toe with Audrey, not be dominated by her, else you wouldn't respect him, but not dominate her, else you wouldn't respect her, but be her intellectual equal. Because among other things, the film is a love story, and it was a love story I was interested in telling because it's a love story about people who fall in love with the way each other thinks. And so they needed to be sort of, there needed to be an equanimity in that relationship. And I'm just a huge fan of Jimmy's, and he was my first choice. He was our first offer, and he said yes. So I got very lucky there. And then Clancy just happens to, yeah, look exactly like C. Everett Koop, which is bizarre. And then also, he has this kind of walking, gentle gravitas as a person, that role really needed to. And then we just got so fortunate with everybody, Brandon Michael Hall and Juliana, who plays Mia. Just, I don't know. And all the extras were amazing. The kids were amazing. It was
Yeah,
just,
that was my next question. Is directing children, is it as challenging as they say to get these very emotional performances from a number of different kids playing patients, in some cases kids who are, terminal? What is that like? And is it as hard as they say?
for me, every director is different. For me, I love working with kids and I love working with animals. I got no problem. Kids, I think are the absolute best. If you give them, and by the way, in life, right? And so, but if you give them a sense of feeling safe on set, like the kids kind of hung out in that room. I would give a little, we talk, at the beginning of the day when we knew we had a kid day, I gathered the crew around and be like, okay, guys, like just remember we have a kid day today. So we got to keep everything that is going to create any tension, like out of the kid room, so they could feel safe to give their best work. And I find with kids and really with people that if you can help design a space for them to be their most vulnerable and their most brilliant. If you're really lucky and you get the camera turned on the right time, like, you'll get it. So I love working with kids. I don't find it hard at all.
I did want to ask a little about you and your biographical background. We do claim you as a Hoosier filmmaker. Our rule is pretty much is if you were born here or spent more than a year here, we claim you as a Hoosier. So you grew up, or at least a portion of your childhood, I believe, was in Dayton, Indiana, near West Lafayette. Is that right?
Yes, from when I was first, it was Rochester, which I think is even smaller than Dayton. And then Dayton from kindergarten through when I was 9. And so Dayton has a population of 900 people. It did then, I think it probably still does now. And then we moved to Lafayette, and then we moved to West Lafayette.
Yeah.
And then that's where I graduated high school.
So just tell me about coming from Indiana, and does that Midwest mentality still influence your filmmaking?
Absolutely. I would say more than anyone could ever guess. What is it? You can take the girl out of Indiana, but you can't take Indiana out of the girl. I I I think it affects my filmmaking. It affects my worldview. It affects how yeah, it affects so many things. I grew up scrappy. We didn't have a lot of money. This was my mom and I. She worked at IHOP, and then she was a commercial real estate broker. Um, eventually became pretty successful when I got into high school, but there were some hard years there. And it was, there was a real sense of community. There was a real sense of children being the priority above anything else. I mean, maybe I just got lucky, but I didn't grow up in a terrific domestic situation. And there were instances where our neighbors like literally saved me, and because I was a child and there was a child that needed help. And it's absolutely affected my worldview, and it's also affected this, I think, the stories I want to tell, because I saw a lot of things, and I knew a lot of kids and people that also saw a lot of things. And I remember being a kid and thinking, I was always obsessed with books and always obsessed with visuals and always obsessed with stories. And I thought, if I get to a point where I'm out of this, not necessarily the state of Indiana, but this bad domestic situation, then I'm going to make it part of my job to try to help tell the stories of people who don't otherwise have a voice. And I think that's kind of been, looking back on it now, kind of the through line of the choices of the stories I've chosen to tell. Like I wasn't sure if I was going to make it out of that bad home situation. And I think for the people, in honor of the people that helped me, I try to do the best I can to maybe give voice to people that otherwise wouldn't have it.
That's great. Well, I see we're almost out of time. I did want to end. I did want to ask a question. I'm sure you probably get a
Yeah.
lot about your father is, of course, the director, Michael Mann.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. We don't see a lot of child or parent-child, passing of the torch when it comes to film directors. So I would just be curious to know, in terms of, does like he give you notes on your movie? Do you give him notes on his movies? That sort of thing.
No, is the short answer. No, we basically, like, I go to his screening and I give him a big hug and say, "That was great, Dad." And then he goes to my screening when it's all done and he gives me a big hug and he says, "That was great." Like,
Yeah.
that's pretty much it. It's like normal kid, it's like normal parent kid stuff. That's kind of what we talk about. We actually don't talk about film a whole lot. It's more like what's going on with my sisters. It's like normal, like any family.
Oh, well, I'm so glad to hear that. Well, thanks very much. Really appreciate your time and really enjoyed the movie, and I wish you all success.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay, take care.